All right. Once again, good evening and welcome to our Summer Budgets Road to Success here with Florida PTA. So we just had a quick game with you all to talk about summer budgets. Now we're going to get to the facts behind it all. So we just played our game, but I want you all to brace yourself because it is budget time, but it's also audit time here for our various local units. So when we had asked a question about PTA and money, it's very important that we talk about it, that we get to the heart of the matter. And while I hate reading from presentations, but it's very important that we all understand this together. While fundraising is not the primary purpose of the PTA, it is essential to secure funds to support the organization's activities. Each PTA should aim to raise only the required funds as specified in the annual budget for planned initiatives and projects. Fundraising events should be well organized to cover all budgeted expenses, including special projects and emergency funds. It's crucial to acknowledge that the responsibility for providing adequate public school facilities, supplies, and programs lies with taxpayers, not the PTA. Public officials are accountable for ensuring that every student receives the necessary resources for a fair and high quality education. If you distill that down to its bare bones, it is our respective governmental institutions responsible for adequately funding our public school system. We are not the cash cow. We are here to advocate for those resources. But we do know that fundraising does help us with our organizational mission and making sure that every child's potential becomes a reality. So just to regroup from the very important road to success that you all had about the audit, because before you can get to budgeting at this stage of the year, you must be sure of landing at the right place. So the audit, it is the responsibility of the outgoing treasurer to make sure that the books are fully examined and to make for the fiscal year in question. And that is for the fiscal year that will be ending this June 30th. The audit committee is supposed to be appointed by the executive board, and they're supposed to have a report at their next regular meeting after the audit is completed. All right. Some local units may be in a position to hire a certified public accountant to do that, and that is okay. But absence of a CPA, your audit committee should be comprised of PTA members of your local unit. And I cannot stress, they cannot be check signers. The incoming treasurer, having not been on the accounts during the fiscal year being examined, can assist and use this opportunity as a learning moment. The annual financial audit review must be completed by August 31st each year. So if our fiscal year ends on June 30th, as soon as it ends, you should be working on completing an audit that will be due to our state audit office by August 31st. And at that time, if you have submitted it to our state office, you are able to complete the necessary 990 that is applicable to your local unit. I cannot stress this. If you complete your audit, let's say on July 15th, you can submit it to the state office and submit your 990. But it's very important that you all do your due diligence, and incoming treasurers that are on the call, please take that opportunity if you are a non-check signer to ask questions, to understand the process, because again, this is a learning moment. Now the budget. We had talked about that the PTA, shouldn't be incurring any financial obligation in one term of office that extend into the next term. We always say, do not commit another board when you're talking about local units. Now, when you're doing your budget, your executive board reviews it and vote on the proposed budget, which is then going to go to the membership to be approved. And that has to happen each year. So I want to make sure we distinguish ourselves, which is your annual budget. This is how your annual budget process should be. Your board comes in, you review the necessary programs and initiatives you're going to want for the upcoming school year. You devise that budget and you formally present that budget, ideally at your first meeting for the year. Once the budget is approved by your membership, it should be strictly adhered to for all financial activities. In fact, it is in your local unit bylaws that you must adhere to your association's approved budget. Can it be amended? It most certainly can, but it has to be amended at a general membership meeting. Approval of the budget does not permit expenditures of the funds. What do I mean by that? Just because you have an approved budget that outlines where you're going to be landing this year financially, it should go through the board approving the expenditures as part of a plan of work or as part of an approved activity. It doesn't mean as a committee chair, oh, you have a line item, let me go start spending. There's a development and planning process that needs to occur. Now that we've reviewed what is an annual budget, let's go into the heart of today's road to success. Summer budget, or is often known as interim budget. Think of the summer or interim budget as your transition from one board to another, as your transition between one fiscal year to another. What typically should happen is that the board-elect, meaning the incoming officers, they present a proposed summer interim budget for adoption to the current membership. Why is this needed? Is because we discussed this earlier during the process of an annual budget that still applies. You cannot be spending funds of your local unit that has not been budgeted. And your summer budget or your interim budget outlines what your expenditures are and what your potential revenue may be in between the fiscal years and in between the school years and the transition from one board to another. Just as the approval took place for your annual budget, your membership needs to approve your summer budget. We do have what I consider high-functioning PTAs that typically do this at once, and that is allowed. But you must make sure that you itemize to your membership in full transparency what it is that they are approving. Their annual budget, and underneath their annual budget, they do itemize what their summer budget would be. And we'll get into what are some likely expenses and revenue for a summer/interim budget. The importance of a summer budget is to allow the board-elect, again, the incoming officers, the ability to cover routine summer expenses as outlined in the bylaws, your local unit bylaws. Continuing on with our discussion, as I mentioned, amendments can be made at any time, but must be voted on by your membership. Again, the board-elect presents the budget to release your funds. Now, continuing on, members must authorize all expenses. Your general membership must authorize your expenses, and they do so with the adoption of your budget. Now, I want you all to stress, why is a summer interim budget important? Is that if the board opts to spend money on unbudgeted items, your membership can retroactively approve it, but your membership, in the same process they can retroactively approve it, they also have the option to decline payment. And that does create a potential issue. It creates an issue where the executive board, meaning the board that is in charge, they may be the ones held accountable for any PTA funds that are owed. I want to stress that. The same concept applies for your annual budget. If you're paying for matters of which that are unbudgeted, your executive board may be held liable for that. So it is important that you operate within the rules of your local unit bylaws, which states follow your budget. If funds has been dispersed in a PTA account for an unapproved or unratified amount, I want to stress the executive board may be responsible for reimbursing the amount. Now, we talked about briefly, or I alluded to us discussing what are likely items to be in your summer budget. To the left of your screen are likely expenses. Of course, the Florida PTA Leadership Convention. that is a legitimate expense for your local unit, not because we want to see you all in person after being virtually each and every Wednesday, but because it is a training opportunity for the incoming board, and it's also a networking opportunity with many vendors and potential partners that can support your local unit. And it is our one culminating event where we can gather and discuss resolutions. Other likely expenses that are on your budget are welcome back activities at your local unit, in which you may have a welcome back for your faculty and staff. You also may have a staff volunteer appreciation, office expenses for PTA use, postage, your AIM insurance, and also your student orientation. Those are likely expenses that may be included in your summer budget. Whereas these are membership opportunities that you may have where you're wanting to bring refreshments so that you can welcome the new families at your PTA. Likely revenue, because just as your annual budget, you should be incorporating revenue that may be coming in. And you may have revenue from your summer uniform sales. You may have donations that the new board has been working on to secure for the upcoming year. You have student agendas that you may be selling as part of your local unit, and of course, your membership dues. And this is not an exhaustive list, but it's to give you a frame of mind of what summer budgets need to include to carry you over from one board to another, from one fiscal year to another, and in between before your membership can adopt the annual budget at your first unit meeting of the year. I would be remiss if I did not stress the 3-to-1 rule, as I did mention fundraisers. There should be at least 3 non-fundraising programs aimed at helping parents or children for advocating for school improvement for every one fundraiser. That can happen in many forms. And if you're coming to our Florida PTA Leadership Convention, we will have an exhaustive conversation on how you can achieve that special note that I've mentioned here. As I mentioned again, we really want to see you all. And as part of my responsibilities as Florida PTA, I do support the Florida PTA Scholarship Program. And we have our famous fundraiser. I think we're going on maybe 15 years probably or close to it. PTA's Got Talent. We want you all to come party with us. It is a Caribbean carnival theme. You can purchase your tickets right now by going to floridapta.org so you can make sure you secure your spot. And if you are a county council officer that is with us this evening, please be sure to email Crystal or I your table, the island in which your table will be representative of for this lovely event. At this time, the floor is open to any questions, concerns, ideas, suggestions, or to simply say that you've been overwhelmed. The first question that I see in the chat can be parents that pay dues for the upcoming year that are not current members for the current year vote on the budget? As I stated, if you're approving a summer budget, it is your current membership. Your current membership that will be approving your summer/interim budget. If you have people paying for membership for the upcoming school year, they are not members during in which this adoption is taking place. However, they will be part of your membership for when your annual budget will be coming up for adoption. The new question, is there a recommended amount to maintain as a minimum balance or emergency fund balance? So that is a very good question. It is okay for nonprofits in which PTA is to have a carryover fund or an emergency reserve because emergencies does happen. Should it be your sole mission to have an extensive, massive summer emergency reserve fund? No, because the monies you raise should be going towards our organizational mission. But yes, you can have. I can't give you a specific minimum amount. However, I typically would encourage people in my when I speak to them one-on-one is that you should have at least, depending on your PTA size, either 500, 1,000, 2,500, or depending on the vast activities you have, maybe even $6,000 or $7,000 that you can carry over. If you don't have it, that is okay, but your local unit should be mindful of preparing themselves for any unanticipated expenses that may come about during the school year. The next question is the summer budget optional or mandatory? The summer budget or interim budget is optional, but I have to stress that means you have no authorization to spend monies during the summer up until the point your membership approves an annual budget. So again, it is not a mandatory. However, if the incoming board, the board-elect, has items in which does need to take place, they will not be able to do so because there is not an approved expenditure plan for your local unit. What if you have no new people when you have the election and it looks like the same board will have to be there another year? Well, that does happen, particularly in schools where membership might not have been extensive. And it's very important that you start having conversations with your principal, with the faculty and staff about promoting the membership and PTA. And it'll be ideal that you are actually present during the various student and family engagement events at your school so that you can start building the backbench to support the local unit for the upcoming school year. And if you need additional assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out to your county council, your region representative, or the state office so that we can have those strategic conversations on planning your local unit's next trajectory. Audit procedures if a treasurer is staying on for a second year. If the treasurer is staying on for a second year because they have been duly elected or in accordance with the bylaws, then it's not an issue. The audit will still take place. Their books need to be audited by at least three non-check signers or CPA so that their books are maintained so that a report can be provided to the membership, submitted to Florida PTA, and so that a 990 can be submitted to the IRS. So those are all, I seem to have exhausted all the questions in the chat, but again, you can post it in the chat or you can simply raise your hand and I'll be happy to recognize you. I have a question here. Can the budget for the 2024-2025 be voted on during the last general meeting of the school year? Yes, it can be. Can it be amended at your first meeting of the year? It certainly can. But if you are presenting an annual budget for the upcoming fiscal year and you provided proper notice to your membership that this was going to be adopted and considered, yes, your budget can be adopted at the last general meeting of the school year. All right. Yes, Chris?
Sorry, it was too much to type. That last one confuses me. I mean, I love it. I love the idea of going ahead and preparing next year's budget. But if we don't have all of our new members, how can we present the budget to the membership?
So you do have your members. You have your members for the school year of 2023-2024. And they do have the ability to take on action items, motions, and proposals. Now, your membership may change as for the upcoming school year, and that does happen. But your current members for the school year of 2023-2024 can adopt a budget for the upcoming year.
That's cool. Thank you.
There's a question, should that voting on new budget be done prior to election if both will be votes in the same meeting? Should that voting on new budget be done prior to election if both will be at the same meeting? I would, just so that people, because if you're anticipating, it depends. If you're anticipating a highly contested election or a very exhaustive meeting, then I would take care of routine items that perhaps may be not as highly contested or controversial, but it is dependent on how your president wants to change the meeting. We budget the conference fees in our regular budget, not summer, because we pay before summer. Is that okay? Yes, that is okay. If you had budgeted the annual leadership convention as part of your annual budget, and those expenses are paid for prior to the end of the fiscal year, that is permissible. The issue that you may have is if there's any reimbursements that may be owed to those volunteers that are coming to convention, such as mileage reimbursement or anything in those particular category. Those expenses may have to wait to be paid until the new budget is adopted or contingent upon your local unit standing rules. As we do have some, as I've called, high functioning PTAs that have very explicit standing rules that covers this process. All right. Again, I'm looking through the chat for any questions. I don't have any at the moment. If you have a question, you can raise your hand and or just unmute yourself, jump right on in. Yes, please.
Okay, so you said that if we have like $6,000, that's kind of like the cushion of where we want to have like the extra money in our budget. If we have more than that and we have not gotten approval to spend the extra, because we started the year off with, like, say 2,000. We now have a lot more than that. So we weren't even expecting to have that much amount. So it wasn't approved in our budget. We don't have another meeting coming up, but we have now what do we do with that extra money? Do we have to get approval to spend it? Or is that because it's extra above what we really should have as extra money? Does that mean that it's kind of, we're free to not have to get approval on the meeting to spend it? I really am asking kind of for the conference part of, we didn't have the money in the beginning of the year to get the conference. I don't know if we're going to have, like, at our next meeting, our final meeting, I don't know if we're going to have time to get the approval for it, but we have so much extra. What do we do?
So what you're speaking, no worries. What you're speaking about is unallocated revenue, in which it's not in your budget. Things perhaps didn't happen. It's unallocated. Yes, you do need your general membership's approval to utilize those funds. Any expense that's not budgeted, even if you have unallocated revenue that can support it, needs to be approved by your general membership. So, and that can, you can save that in your account and you can use that money to start up the school year. But I have to clarify to you all that within your summer budget, it does need to be explicit as to what the activities are. So it can't just be one lump sum, any and all summer expenses. While you may have a line item for miscellaneous, but we need to be fully transparent with our membership as to what those funds are. So I just want to make sure I clarify that. Did you have a follow-up question? Because I want to make sure I fully answered your question, Natalia.
I think that kind of answered it. We just have an overabundance of money, especially after you said what you said with your number. And so I just want to make sure, like, because we're transitioning into board. And it's been a very messy transition the way they're trying to do it, because we now have money. They are now interested in being a part of the team, where we've had late people trying to join so that they could vote. And I'm like, well, you have to have been a part of the membership 30 days before the election. But they're trying to be very messy because we now have money, and they didn't care last year when we didn't have any money. Nobody cared about elections. Nobody cared about anything. We've now got people trying to tell us when to have the election meeting, trying to, like, you're not.
Sounds like I need to come over and have some drinks so we can talk about this foolishness.
Yes, please, please, because I need someone to talk to that understands. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Well, send me an email, treasurer@floridapta.org, and let me make sure I connect you with the right support team so that we can make sure we help your local unit, even if it's just to bounce ideas or to just give you perspective or regurgitate or share resources that is currently in our kit of materials. You don't have to go, your local unit doesn't have to go through that alone. We're here to support you in that effort. There's a
Yeah,
question.
I
Hold
feel
on.
like
Mhm.
I feel like we are advocates, and it's almost like we need someone to advocate for us too, because they try to kind of take advantage and do things. And so I appreciate that. I'll definitely be reaching out because I really haven't really known what to think or do about the situation. So thank you.
Not a problem. There is a question of the fiscal year. So the fiscal year runs through July 1st through June 30th. So on June 30th, 2024, the fiscal year which supported your activities for the 2023-2024 school year will be coming to an end. And on July 1, 2024 is the new fiscal year, which is the fiscal year 25, because it's going to end on June 30th, 2025. And that fiscal year is supporting your activities from the school year of 2024 to 2025. And on the topic of fiscal year, I would be remiss if I did not tell you all there is a motion that's coming before you all from Florida PTA's Budget Committee to change Florida PTA's fiscal year as we try to align ourselves with our seasonal activities and best practices. And that's just how important it is for us to make sure we practice what we preach. Jennifer, you raise your hand. Please ask your question.
Yes, I have a question. I wasn't aware that we could do a summer budget and include the conference, the PTA conference, as like a training fee. So if we were to go ahead and do a vote on that, who typically goes to the conference? Is it just like the president and vice presidents, or like the board, or what details, like what should I budget it for that, like expense wise? Is it like a certain amount that can come per unit, or how does that usually work, since we've never been there before?
Certainly. So who comes to the Florida PTA Leadership Convention is predicated on your local unit's finances and who's actually willing to go, because we know it's the summer, we know there's summer plans, and some folks may not align. If your funds allow to send your president, absolutely. If you're able to send your treasurer, absolutely, your secretary, or even a vice president, we encourage you to send, as many folks of your local unit that your budget can sustain, even if it's just one person. Factors that should be considered in budgeting that is potentially mileage, the travel costs it takes to get from point A to point B and from point B back to point A. Hotel costs for you to stay at the facility so that you can participate and have a place to, to lounge yourself. Meals for each of the applicable days that those individuals will be there. We do have some on our Florida PTA website, the menu for our internet cafe that will be open during various parts of convention. And of course, you want to account lunch, dinner, and so on and so forth. So those are the high priority items that your local unit should budget for when considering to send someone to the Florida PTA Leadership Convention.
Okay, so we could use our budgeted, if we get it approved, we can cover those expenses if we have the money in our budget. Is that what you're saying? Like I can include the hotel costs and meals and mileage?
Absolutely. And I just
Okay,
want to be
thanks.
clear, it doesn't mean that each of those things that I mentioned has to be itemized out on your budget, because that may get exhaustive. But when you factor in the cost, you can put Florida PTA Leadership Convention and the X number of dollars to support that category. Because in some cases, if you're sending two people and they're willing to share a room, that changes how much you need to actually budget for them to go to convention. If it's a single room, a double room, so those are factors you may want to consider as well, because that may save you
Thank you.
money or just new costs to consider. Absolutely. There's a
Thank you.
question here. We have a line item in our budget for hospitality, and we have some funds left at the end of the year. Is the PTA allowed to host an off-campus lunch for our teachers or does it have to be on campus? So if you have a hospitality line item and you want to host an off-campus activity with those funds, and that's within your approved budget as an expenditure, yes, you can. And this is why it's very important that as a PTA, we make sure that we pay up and have our AIM insurance covered, because that covers us just as it covers us off campus. I mean, on campus, it does cover us within the four corners of our agreement for off-campus activities. And yes, it is a legitimate expense that your PTA can have for your local unit. Yes, Natalia, I see your hand up.
Hi. Okay, another question. Can outgoing board members go to the convention? Is it okay if outgoing board members go, or is it really just for current board members or future board members, that are going to convention? How is that? What's the thought process on that? What's allowed?
The PC answer would have me say that it should be your incoming board that has first priority to attend our leadership convention, because of the depth of trainings that we're going to offer at the Florida PTA Leadership Convention. But if it is in your local unit's best interest to send someone other than that, then that's your local unit's decision. Especially that person will be a volunteer, they still have children or a stakeholder at that local unit, and they can utilize a training that will benefit. That is a decision your local unit can make. So I won't tell you no, but your local unit should be the one included in that decision-making process. There's a question here. If we want to put the 2024-2025 in place by voting on it at the final meeting of the 2023-2024 school year, meaning the current school year, is it necessary to have the 2023-2024 audit completed? So before those funds can be expended, yes, the audit will need to be done. Can you have a budget in place for expenditures? Absolutely. But your audit before those expenses start occurring should be completed with our forms on the Florida PTA website, submitted to Florida PTA, and of course submitted to submitted to the IRS. But yes, the audit should be completed for your local unit prior to our deadline. All right. Checking to see if any more questions. Anyone have any hands raised? You're a quiet group tonight.
Jude, just to follow up for
Absolutely.
clarity on that budget being approved before the new officers or the new school year, what would be your beginning balance? Because you haven't done the audit, so you don't know how much you have left. How would you work that?
So that's a trick question, Melanie, because there are some local units that will not include the beginning balance. They have their expenditure and their revenue planned for that particular budgeting cycle. Your beginning balance can simply be what it is on the account as of the date that the membership is adopting that budget for that particular year or for that month. And of course, the budget can always be amended to reflect, but it all depends on how the local unit is choosing to do that budget.
Okay. Thank you.
Not a problem, because I can give the example of Florida PTA. In the budget that the board has received, we budgeted our income that we're anticipating and the expenses that we're anticipating for the upcoming year. Our beginning balance, meaning the monies we have in our accounts, are not reflected on that budget. However, it is presented and discussed during the treasurer's financial reports. But if you look at our budgets, we're budgeting what we're anticipating on spending and are anticipating on bringing in. Can you share some budget lines items we should not have? Ooh, Stephanie, we can be here all day. But what I can tell you is that the local units have to make the best decision for their school. I typically discourage line items that has, let's say, principal discretionary fund. No, the principal should not have a line item all for themselves to spend for their local unit. And I typically say that's a red flag. I discourage local units from engaging in large, complex beautification projects at their school because I'm of the firm belief, as well within the culture of Florida PTA, that that is a responsibility of our school boards as we pay taxes on this matter. So I want to make sure that, I emphasize that wherever there's an opportunity. I also would say that there should be a balance between what the local unit is spending on faculty and staff and of our students. I'm of the firm belief that we should be spending more on the kids and not on the adults. So those are things that I definitely would encourage you to look for. Another thing is the miscellaneous. I understand there's a necessity for it because you can't think of everything, but there should not be an absorbent amount of dollars out in the miscellaneous line item. It should be justified within the budget process. And that's just me being very politically correct on this call, but we can always have a good sidebar, Stephanie, as to what specifics for your PTA or for anyone else on this call. Or you can join us at Florida PTA's Leadership Convention, where we will have robust conversations in the variety of treasurers workshops that we will have and at the Treasurers Roundtable. Isn't that right, Kimberly? Probably putting her on the spot there.
Oh, yes. And I'm looking forward to it.
When is the AIM insurance renewed? That's a trick question. I'm gonna say that's gonna be dependent on when you actually pay for that insurance policy. The dates may fluctuate depending on when you renew. I know most may be at the end of the year or at the beginning of the year. So I would definitely encourage you to look at your policy to see when that renewal. And I do know AIM is very good about sending some notices. If we had a summer budget or a proposed budget expenditure on our budget throughout the year, would it already be approved? So, if I understand the question, Daniel, if you had your summer budget approved when your membership adopted its annual budget and both were approved at that meeting, then yes, your summer or interim budget is approved to carry you over between the school years and the transition year.
Thank
if
you.
I
I need
could-
to get based on the training, but thank you.
Absolutely. How much is a reasonable amount for a miscellaneous line item? If you ask me, it should be zero because things are planned out. But I do understand emergencies happen. And I can't give you a specific amount because as I've mentioned, every local unit is different. But you should have what's considered an appropriate amount, whether it's $2,000 or $3,000 or just $500 for those miscellaneous amounts. For me, that's a judgment call on the local unit, as it varies as to the number of activities that you all may have throughout the year. If you're a local unit bringing in $10,000 a year in your sales and revenue to support our organizational mission, then maybe you should have $1,500 in your budget for miscellaneous for unexpected items. And of course, if it grows to 20, then maybe it's 2,500. I think that's a judgment call for your local unit. But if you ask me, zero. But I know I don't live in that utopia where everything is planned out. Hopefully that answers your question, Jessica. All right, I think I've exhausted all of the questions in the chat. Again, if you have a question, just raise your hand, unmute yourself. A president discretionary fund. And there's a question about what about a president's discretionary fund? In the same vein, as I mentioned to you all, principals should not have one. I would say the same thing about the president, because you want to make sure that things are planned for. And if they need expenses, then perhaps that's that miscellaneous expense that they can draw from, but there needs to be accountability. Again, every local unit is different, but there should be accountability for that process. The question is, so is it better to have a miscellaneous fund than a president's fund? I would definitely say miscellaneous, because that covers all the officers and it's not gives the impression that this is the president's money. Someone has woken up from their 6 o'clock nap. All right. Yes, Melanie?
Sorry, I was scrolling through the chat and Danielle Passman asked if you could review a proposed summer budget. I don't know if Danielle is asking you to do that here, or is that something for later?
I mean, you're more than welcome to. I mean, I made changes just based on the training, so it's more templated than proposed, right? Because the board elect hasn't obviously sat down and look at it, but there was certain items that we had in there, and then certain items that I did add just based on the training. So I did throw it out there. We did have a large amount of carryover funds. I mean, we've always set aside money for spiritware and things like that to start our year. But there was some items that where money was given back to the district. So we do have a large amount of carryover, funds, which are identified in there.
Okay, good, Jude.
Thank you, Daniel. If you could email that to me, because I'm having difficulty download it to treasurer@floridapta.org, because I think that's probably a good resource we can add on to folks as we prepare to finalize our kit of materials for the upcoming year. So there's a question. So when we use discretionary funds, we should amend the budget to reflect what was spent. You can. However, I think that's a notation that needs to be made as you prepare the next fiscal year's budget. Because every document does change, but you should make sure that you make note of that so that you can add it. Because you want to make sure that your membership clearly understood the drawdown, or you have historical record, depending on how your local unit's record keeping is, to identify what the trends has been for that particular local unit. Hopefully, Amy, I answered your question. All right, we gotta thank you, Daniel. Well, it is about time for us to end our lovely evening today. Can you give me 5 minutes? Can you give me 5 minutes? I'm coming. Thank you all for joining us. Carolyn, any final words before we end tonight's our evening?
Maxine is here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maxine Lures, the president-elect of Florida PTA. I am babysitting my granddaughter, but I put her down. Thank you, everyone, for attending tonight. We got a lot of wonderful information. Thank you, Mr. Jude Bruno. And I look forward to seeing everyone at convention, and have a blessed night.
Not a problem, Madam President-elect. And folks, if you're coming to convention, if you want to make me happy, if you want the joys to come out of my eyes, purchase your ticket to PTA's Got Talent. It is a Caribbean theme. It is going to be epic. Carolyn is going to dance. We're going to have a conga line. We're going to have a variety of activities. The councils are getting ready to decorate their tables in the Caribbean theme of their choice. So please join us. We might even have a junk canoe coming. You never know. But please.
Hey, Jude.
Yes, ma'am.
There's also our DEIJ luncheon and our awards and recognition luncheon, which we want to encourage people to participate in, especially if you have submitted applications for awards for either of those categories. Be sure and buy your tickets so you can cheer on your fellow awardees.
Absolutely. If there are no thoughts, folks, thank you all for joining. If you have any questions after the presentation, please email treasurer@floridapta.org. If you hated tonight's presentation, email compliance@floridapta.org. As if Kimberly does not have enough to do. But thank you all for joining us and look forward to seeing you at our next Road to Success next Wednesday.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Great
night.
Night, thank you for joining.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, look at my hair. It looks horrible.
Where is the green baby? Can we see?